Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going to embark on a completely fascinating journey of textual deconstruction. Now, at first glance, the source material we're looking at today might seem like, well, just a mere nursery rhyme, right? Something transient you'd hear echoing out of an iPad screen. But we're going to look closer, a lot closer. We are going to treat this transcript as what it truly is, a tightly wound, roughly 80-word masterclass built on intense structural repetition and behavioral loops. Through this explainer, we're going to totally dissect the underlying mechanics of this brief text, examining exactly how it shifts from innocent instruction to a gripping, relentless cycle of accusation and denial. So get ready to see something incredibly familiar in a completely unprecedented light.
Okay, let's dive into this rigid, highly analytical journey. First, we'll hit the educational color prelude, followed by the anatomy of the interrogation. From there, we'll look at deception and sugar consumption, map out the variations of the resolution, and finally observe the endless narrative loop.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the educational color prelude. So we begin our analysis right at the abrupt starting line of this transcript, which initially presents itself not as a narrative at all, but strictly as a rudimentary learning tool. The text opens with a super inviting command, "Let's learn the colors together." And what follows is a highly restricted, stark color palette. We're presented with just 3 colors: red, purple, yellow. It's kind of an interesting triad, right? It skips over your conventional primary color sets to immediately introduce a secondary color. But honestly, what's truly remarkable here isn't just the specific colors they chose, but how quickly this whole educational premise is just entirely discarded. Literally, once the word yellow is spoken, the text abruptly shifts gears. The color lesson vanishes forever, instantly replaced by a completely different narrative structure. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer structural imbalance of the text. Look at that tiny sliver. That represents the educational color learning prelude. The massive chunk dominating everything else is the Johnny narrative. Basically, the educational promise is nothing more than a bait and switch. It lures the listener in with the comfortable, familiar structure of learning colors, only to plunge them immediately into a dominant, inescapable cycle of interrogation. Which brings us to Section 2, Anatomy of the Interrogation. Let's break down this core loop. Leaving education behind, the crucial point is understanding the exact sequence of events that plays out. It's a highly formalized, strict procedural loop that repeats with absolute mechanical precision. Step 1 is the summons, a double utterance of the name Johnny Johnny, which is met with the obedient acknowledgement, "Yes, Papa." Step 2 is the accusation, the direct query regarding eating sugar, which is of course immediately denied. Step 3 escalates to the meta-accusation, questioning the denial itself, telling lies, and again a denial. Finally, Step 4 is the verification, moving abruptly from verbal inquiry to a physical demand. Open your mouth. This command right here is the intense, dramatic pivot point of the text. All the verbal sparring, all those polite yes papas and no papas, they dissolve entirely in the face of this absolute directive. It is the climax of every single loop, the exact moment where truth can no longer be hidden behind words and must be physically laid bare. Moving right along to Section 3, Deception and Sugar Consumption. Let's define our entities. To really wrap our heads around this dynamic, we need to define exactly who the players are in this repetitive, high-stakes drama. Let's look at our first entity. Papa is entirely defined by his authority within this transcript. He doesn't answer questions, he only asks them. He's the interrogator, the figure who issues the ultimate demand for physical verification. His role is absolutely singular and unwavering, to extract the truth from his subject through a relentless line of questioning. And then we have our second entity. Johnny is perpetually the accused. His entire existence in this text is reactionary. He is cornered in a position of defense, repeatedly denying the alleged consumption of sugar and the subsequent deception. He's essentially a subject under constant scrutiny, forced to answer to a higher power in an ongoing, stressful loop of suspicion. When we compare these elements side by side, we see the profound tension between Papa and Johnny. On one side, we have eating sugar, the initial physical act being interrogated. On the other side, we have telling lies, the psychological act of denying it. The text brilliantly captures the escalation from a mere dietary infraction to a full-blown moral failing. The real tension doesn't come from the sugar itself, but from the cat-and-mouse game of deception that follows it. All right, Section 4, Variations of the Resolution. The subtle shifts in the climax. Now, what's really interesting here is that while the structural loop of the interrogation is completely rigid, the words literally never change up to a point, the final reactions are the only elements that offer any variation whatsoever. the text isn't entirely uniform. In loop 1, the reaction to opening the mouth is, ha, wow, a statement of almost genuine surprise. In loop 3, we get ha ha, aha, which is an affirmation, like a knowing confirmation of guilt. But in loops 2, 4, and 5, it just settles into a flat, standardized ha ha. You can really see how the standard ha ha resolution overwhelmingly dominates the text. The unique anomalies, the surprise of ha wow, and the confirmation of ha ha aha, they happen early on. But as the loops continue, the reaction just degrades into a uniform, repetitive ha-ha. The surprise is gone, the confirmation is completely unnecessary. It essentially becomes purely mechanical laughter, like a programmed response to an endlessly repeating scenario.
And that leads us perfectly into our final section, Section 5, the endless narrative loop, a cycle of sugar and lies.
Stepping back to view the transcript as a whole, we see it isn't just a single interaction, but a continuous, inescapable cycle. There are 5 virtually identical interrogations packed into this tiny fragment of text. The sheer volume of repetition is just staggering. It drives home how this behavioral loop dominates the entire piece. It isn't a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a hypnotic rhythm, a carousel of accusation and denial that simply refuses to stop. Let's move to the raw text and see how this builds. When you remove the line breaks and view the text as pure data, the rhythm creates a dizzying cadence. Johnny, Johnny, yes, Papa, eating sugar, no, Papa, telling lies, no, Papa, open your mouth. The very moment the mouth is opened and the laughter subsides, the text immediately resets. Johnny, Johnny. It begins again. There's no lesson learned, no actual resolution achieved, only the immediate restart of the interrogation protocol.
So what does this all mean? It brings us to a provocative final thought. If the cycle of eating sugar and telling lies never ever ends, who is really in control here? Johnny or Papa? Sure, Papa might ask the questions and demand the mouth to be opened, but Johnny continuously forces the loop to reset by allegedly committing the exact same infraction over and over again. It's a bizarre, truly fascinating power dynamic locked within a highly repetitive digital text. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the source material. It just goes to show there is incredible structure hidden in the most unexpected places if you only take the time to really analyze it. See you next time.